The chapter Diversion is where we find one of the most famous passages from Les Pensées, which is, "I have often said that the sole cause of man's unhappiness is that he does not know how to stay quietly in his room." Notable or helpful point that could help us during the lockdowns that we've had and the several waves of the pandemic. This chapter ends on a cheerful note, typically cheerful note for Pascal. If I can find it. "How hollow and foul is the heart of man." So we've got a very, very rosy-cheeked chapter coming up. It is actually very good fun, very thought-provoking. It's called Diversion, divertissement in the original. The French that I have, this copy diverges very strongly from the English copy, with the preface by T.S. Eliot here, maybe as an echo to the meaning of diversion. Diversion, certainly not really anymore, but in history of English, ordinarily meant fun, pleasure, recreation. It comes from, it's a military term, I believe. I'm reading, it is an act of diverting something from its due or ordinary course. So in the embedded history of the word, wouldn't that suggest that ordinary life is highly boring and that having fun is to be taken from the ordinary course of life, which is dull? The military sense is from drawing attention and force of the enemy. So taking the course of the enemy away from its ordinary path. Diversion, dis, from aside, and vertere, to turn. So it's a Latin term. Divertissement, or diversion, if something is fun. I completely forgot the French there, but it's something like that in French. Diverté or something. I completely had a blank on that. I continue, so I'll start with the beginning of the chapter. Diversion. "If man were happy, the less he were diverted, the happier he would be, like the saints and God. Yes, but is man not happy who can find delight in diversion? No, because it comes from somewhere else, from outside. So he is dependent, and always liable to be disturbed by 1,001 accidents, which inevitably cause distress. Diversion. Being unable to cure death, wretchedness, and ignorance, men have decided, in order to be happy, not to think about such things. Despite these afflictions, man wants to be happy, only wants to be happy, and cannot help being happy, or cannot help wanting to be happy." There's a suggestion that the desire to be happy is what causes so much distress. That would certainly be something that points towards Buddhism, the suffering of people constantly striving. And the hint in this chapter is, therefore, getting oneself out of this desire, of this striving, therefore reaching a place of a detachment or meditation. "But how shall he go about it? The best thing would be to make himself immortal. But as he cannot do that, he has decided to stop himself thinking about it. Surely being immortal is the worst possible option if you're bored of life and you're seeking fun. But I digress. I feel that it is possible that I might never have existed, for myself consists in my thoughts." This sounds a bit like a hint or a nod towards Descartes. I just read that René Descartes actually paid the Pascal family a visit, which wasn't recorded. Apparently, René Descartes had a lively discussion with the adolescent Blaise Pascal. That's all I know. And I think that's all anyone knows about the exchange. In any case, Blaise Pascal was very much in the shadow of his older, you could say, intellectual uncle, Blaise Pascal. This idea that we only exist in our thoughts. The only proof we have is in our thoughts. So I feel that it is possible that I might never have existed, for myself consists in my thought. Je sens que je puis n'avoir point été, car le moi consiste dans ma pensée. Le moi consiste dans ma pensée. It's very beautiful French. Therefore, I who think would never have been if my mother had been killed before I had come to life. Therefore, I am not a necessary being. I am not eternal or infinite either, but I can see that there is in nature a being who is necessary, eternal, and infinite. It makes you wonder why Blaise Pascal thought there had to be a supreme being. If for anything else, just to put or cast a shadow upon everything that was less significant than this transcendent being. Donc moi qui pense n'aurais point été si ma mère eût été tuée, if my mother was killed, avant que j'eusse été animé. Donc je ne suis pas un être nécessaire. I'm not a necessary being. Je ne suis pas aussi éternel ni infini. I'm not eternal nor infinite. Mais je vois bien, you see that a lot in Pascal, I see very well, je vois bien qu'il y a dans la nature un être nécessaire, éternel et infini. I see very clearly that there is in nature a necessary being, eternal and infinite. So this is the beginning of the very famous passage, the one that you'll see on, not exactly fortune cookies, but that level of, that sort of register. A man sitting in his room on his own. And maybe it's not so bad that this is so well known, but it has reached almost a cliche. All the misfortune of the world derives from man not being able to sit alone. Diversion. Sometimes when I set to thinking about the various activities of men, the dangers and troubles which they face at court or in war, giving rise to so many quarrels and passions, daring and often wicked enterprises and so on, I have often said that the sole cause of man's unhappiness is that he does not know how to stay quietly in his room. Divertissement. Quand je m'y suis mis quelquefois à considérer les diverses agitations des hommes et les périls et les peines où ils s'exposent dans la cour, dans la guerre, d'où naissent tant de querelles, des passions dont est prise hardie et souvent mauvaise, j'ai dit souvent que tout le malheur des hommes vient d'une seule chose, qui est de ne savoir pas demeurer en repos dans une chambre. I'll read that last bit again. It's so wonderful. I have often said that the sole cause of man's unhappiness is that he does not know how to stay quietly in his room. J'ai dit souvent que tout le malheur des hommes vient d'une seule chose, qui est de ne savoir pas demeurer et repos dans une chambre. So I'm just going to zoom in on two words there. He does not know how to stay quietly in his room. It's stay quietly in the English, but there's two separate sort of verbal phrases there. Demeurer, to stay. Demeurer is interesting. So man is miserable because he doesn't know how to stay quietly in his room. In the French, he doesn't know how to demeurer en repos. So demeurer is there's two things. It's to live, actually, to inhabit. But it also can mean, I think historically, I'm not so sure if it's true anymore, demeurer, at least historically, used to mean to delay. And en repos, demeurer en repos, you can guess repose, to stay in repose, to stay in quiet. Demeurer is a really interesting word. So it can mean to delay, to tarder, to become, to retarder, se tarder, to stop. So not just to live, but to stop. And it's really curious, the echoes or the ripples of this in English. We've got the word moratorium, which I always forget the meaning of, but it's sort of like as a temporary halting of something or service, or brings to mind amnesties, for example. Weapons, amnesties, conflicts, moratorium. Also brings to mind the period of deliberate delay before a decision is made. Demorer, if the first thing one of the first words you learn in Portugal, if you move to Portugal, is demorar, to delay. You'll hear that a lot in Portugal as you wait patiently in one of many queues. But believe it or not, this is really, really fascinating. It's possible that the word moron comes from this original root. Believe it's Greek and previously Sanskrit. Moro, meaning pause or delay. It's possible that moron, moratorium, and demorar in Portuguese, they all come from that same root from the Sanskrit moro. I thought that was interesting. Demeurer en repos, to stay in quiet. That's the origins of all man's problems. Is not being able to sit on your hands. We had to sit on our hands when we were at primary school. And I understand why my teachers made me do that. I teach children now here in southern France. And my goodness, trying to channel, not contain, but try to channel their energy is one of the hardest things I'm confronted with. Trying to focus energy, trying to instill patience. Energy is good, right? So why has this energy here been diverted into stopping people from being able to sit it quietly in their rooms? Valentine Tomberg, the famous, or not so famous, but the anonymous author of Meditations on the Tarot, discussed a quiet concentration in his discussions of the Queen. I think it was the Queen or the Princess in the Tarot, number 3 or 4. No, number 2. Excuse me. In the Major Arcana, he talks about the Queen resting with her books in quiet concentration, a slow concentration, which she calls burning without smoke. Burning without smoke. That to me is the sort of alchemy of meditation, of this perfect active inaction. This is something that Blaise Pascal does not reference in my reading once. Doesn't mention meditation, tranquil, balanced detachment. Never mentions this. And whether that's his failing or whether that's because it didn't occur to him to discuss what would then have been called Oriental ideas, or what we'd now say ideas from the East. And perhaps a lot of texts, so Hindu or Vedic, Buddhist texts probably just weren't even published or translated by that point. That strikes me as much more of a 19th century phenomenon of Western writers, like, I don't know when Schopenhauer was around, but I think he was quite obsessed with Hindu or Vedic texts. So much here leans towards or suggests that the perfect equanimity, perfect approach to life, avoiding suffering, is to forget about diversion and to stare boredom in the face, make friends with it, and sit quietly in one's room. He says, talking to himself. I'll continue. A man wealthy enough for life's needs would never leave home to go to sea or besiege some fortress if he knew how to stay at home and enjoy it. Just a quick thing. So many moments in these passages of Blaise Pascal, when he's trying to mention an ordinary passage of life, he mentions war. And he also mentions the court. He mentions judgment. He mentions besieging, conflict. Does say something about the violent times that Blaise Pascal lived in with regards to the Huguenot and the Catholic conflicts. A man wealthy enough For life's needs would never leave home to go to sea or besiege some fortress if he knew how to stay at home and enjoy it. Men would never spend so much on a commission in the army if they could bear living in town all their lives. And they only seek after the company and diversion of gambling because they do not enjoy staying at home. But after closer thought, looking for the particular reasons for all our unhappiness, now that I knew its general cause, I found one very cogent reason in the natural unhappiness of our feeble mortal condition, so wretched that nothing can console us when we really think about it. Imagine any situation you like, add up all the blessings with which you could be endowed. To be king is still the finest thing in the world, yet if you imagine one with all the advantages of his rank, by no means of diversion, left to ponder and reflect on what he is, this limp felicity will not keep him going. He is bound to start thinking of all the threats facing him, of possible revolts, finally of inescapable death and disease, with the result that if he is deprived of so-called diversion, he is unhappy, indeed more unhappy than the humblest of his subjects who can enjoy sport and diversion. The only good thing for men, therefore, is to be diverted from thinking of what they are, either by some occupation which takes their mind off it, or by some novel and agreeable passion which keeps them busy, like gambling, hunting, some absorbing show, in short, by what is called diversion. That is why gaming and feminine society, war and high office are so popular. De là vient que le jeu et la conversation des femmes, la guerre, les grands emplois sont si recherchés. It is not that they really bring happiness, nor that anyone imagines that true bliss comes from possessing the money to be won at gaming, or the hare that is hunted. No one would take it as a gift. What people want is not the easy, peaceful life that allows us to think of our unhappy condition, nor the dangers of war, nor the burdens of office, but the agitation that takes our mind off it and diverts us. That is why we prefer the hunt to the capture. That is why men are so fond of hustle and bustle. That is why prison is such a fearful punishment. De là vient que les hommes aiment tant le bruit et les remuements. So bruit, from that is where it comes. From this reason, it's that men love noise, and remuement. Remuement is like stirring or wiggling or shaking. What a wonderful idea of the unhappy human, the wiggler, the shaker, the stirrer. And we have a series of paragraphs which start in the original, de là vient, de là vient. From that comes this. Because of this, therefore that. De là vient. If he doesn't start off a paragraph like that, he starts off saying, voilà que blah, 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 blah. Voilà. And common word we all know, we say sometimes in English, voilà, really literally means look at that, or it's literally look over there, voilà, and you're pointing to something slightly éloigné, something slightly distant from you. And he's always seems to point to something and try to put his finger on why something is the way it is. De là vient, from that comes. That is why men are so fond of hustle and bustle. That is why prison is such a fearful punishment. That is why the pleasures of solitude are so incomprehensible. That, in fact, is the main joy of being a king, because people are continually trying to divert him and procure him every kind of pleasure. That is no exaggeration. If you look into the history of jesters and fools, it's exactly that. They're the ones who are supposed to keep a smile on their king's face. They're also, curiously, the ones paid by the king to subvert the king. This isn't an isolated example in European history. Fools, jesters, they can be found in all huge societies with large dynasties. Ancient China, ancient Egypt. We see a role in many places in human society for someone to deliberately diverge the king or the queen from their ordinary course. And there's something hugely destructive, therefore, in boredom. That is all that men have been able to devise for attaining happiness. Those who philosophize about it, holding that people are quite unreasonable to spend all day chasing a hare that they would not have wanted to buy, have little knowledge of our nature. The hare itself would not save us from thinking about death and the miseries distracting us, but hunting it does so. Thus, when Pyrrhus was advised to take the rest towards which he was so strenuously striving, he found it very hard to do so. Telling a man to rest is the same as telling him to live happily. It means advising him to enjoy a completely happy state which he can contemplate at leisure without cause for distress. It means not understanding nature. Thus, men who are naturally conscious of what they are shun nothing so much as rest. They would do anything to be disturbed. It is wrong then to blame them. They are not wrong to want excitement if they only wanted it for the sake of diversion. The trouble is that they want it as though once they had the thing they seek, they could not fail to be truly happy. So the question is, what does it mean to be disturbed if you want to be disturbed? Then being disturbed it's an impossible concept. What would be more disturbing in the eyes of Pascal is to not be disturbed. That would be what would really pull the rug from under people's feet. So the paradox of being disturbed is that it can't exist. Only in its absence can being disturbed exist. That is what justifies calling their search a vain one. All this shows that neither the critics nor the criticized understand man's real nature. When men are reproached from pursuing so eagerly something that could never satisfy them, their proper answer, if they really thought about it, ought to be that they simply want a violent and vigorous occupation to take their minds off themselves. And that is why they choose some attractive object to entice them in ardent pursuit. Their opponents could find no answer to that. One of my favourite passages. Vanity, pleasure of showing off. Dancing. You must think where to put your feet. In the original, vanity, pleasure of showing off. La vanité, le plaisir de la montrer aux autres. I like the fact that English adds a word to montrer. Montrer is show, and French doesn't really have the concept showing off. You can just really montrer à quelqu'un. You can just show someone. It's a little bit ambiguous to me, but English adds that particle off to really emphasize that you're showing your own, you're displaying your own vanity, or accidentally showing your own vanity. And then we have dancing. You must think where to put your feet. La danse, il faut bien penser où l'on mettra ses pieds. One of these really short sentences that ignites the thought. It really brings the rest of the paragraph to an end and kicks off the next bit. Dancing, you must think where to put your feet. Dancing being possibly slightly risky, a slightly dangerous activity, especially if you're in your high heels. If you don't constantly have distractions, then you won't execute your dance properly. Rock climbers are a little bit similar. They talk often about it being a kind of meditation. Boxing for me is the same thing. Boxing and rock climbing, you have to pay attention, otherwise you're going to get hurt. Dancing slightly similarly. Dancing, you must think where to put your feet. So you're imposing on yourself constant mini disturbances to avoid you gazing into the eternal chasm of your own existence. Not to quote Pascal there. But they do not answer like that because they do not know themselves. They do not know that all they want is the hunt and not the capture. The nobleman sincerely believes that hunting is a great sport, the sport of kings, but his huntsman does not feel like that. They imagine that if they secured a certain appointment, they would enjoy resting afterwards, and they do not realize the insatiable nature of cupidity or lust. They think that they genuinely want rest when all they want is activity. How many people have you met who've retired and then got fairly miserable and have sought activity? That's almost as if the body only knows activity. The body itself doesn't know anything outside of its habit of constant busyness. There comes de là vient, voilà, that the idea of working 42 hours a week, to me, strikes me as utterly bizarre and unnatural. Doesn't seem to make any sense that you would devote 42 hours of your life, and that's not much in comparison to America. Here it's 35 hours in France. To one pursuit. There seems to be no pursuit, in my opinion, that is worth 42 hours of your life. 9 to 5 times 5, or thereabouts. Okay. I think I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Here we go. Man is so unhappy that he would be bored even if he had no cause for boredom by the very nature of his temperament, and he is so vain that though he has 1,001 basic reasons for being bored, the slightest thing like pushing a ball with a billiard cue would be enough to distract him. There's a word frequently pops up in this chapter. There was a word in one of the videos here. I believe it was a video. I think it was the video about contradictions, where he talks about bonheur, or happiness, good time, literally. And in this chapter, malheur, malheureux, malheureusement, unfortunately, literally bad time, bad timely. Ainsi que l'homme est si malheureux. Which would be, that is why this man who is so miserable, however sad a man may be, qu'il s'ennuie, that's a difficult word, s'ennuierait même sans aucune cause d'ennui par l'état propre de sa complexion. Without diversion, there is no joy. Excuse me, no, I'm completely skipping ahead there. Man is so unhappy that he would be bored, even if he had no cause for boredom, by the very nature of his temperament. And he is so vain that, though he has 1,001 basic reasons for being bored, the slightest thing like pushing a ball with a billiard cue would be enough to disturb him. I've mangled that up quite a bit, but I'll just jump to et il est si vain, I don't pronounce that, qu'est en pleine de 1000 causes essentielles d'ennui, la moindre chose comme un billard et une balle qu'il pousse suffisant pour le divertir. So a billiard cue is enough to divert him. Pushing a ball is enough. That I think I'll just skip ahead because there's 2 very long paragraphs. It just seems to me, very quickly in summary, that there's discussions of addiction with regards to not talking about the chemical or psychoactive aspect of drug addiction, instead discussing we could say the heuristics of drug addiction, the practical aspects of being a full-time drug addict. What would that mean? It means walking down the road, finding your dealer, waiting for him or her, getting the money ready, and before that step, procuring the money, looking forward to meeting the man. That's why the Velvet Underground Lou Reed captured it so well in Waiting for the Man. This expectation, this driving beat towards the hit that is, in this case, heroin. Drug addiction seems to be far more than replacing a gap in someone's emotional life or just trauma. It seems to be a whole lifestyle, particularly with heroin, which is a romance with opioids. The chase of procuring drugs is part of the addiction. That is why man, who lost his only son a few months ago and was so troubled and oppressed this morning by lawsuits and quarrels, is not thinking about it anymore. Do not be surprised. He is concentrating all his attention on which way the ball will go that his dogs have been so hotly pursuing for the past 6 hours. That is all he needs. However sad a man may be, if you can persuade him to take up some diversion, he will be happy while it lasts. And however happy a man may be, if he lacks diversion and has no absorbing passion or entertainment to keep boredom away, he will soon be depressed and unhappy. Without diversion, there is no joy. With diversion, there is no sadness. Wouldn't that suggest that can't we be expert meditators, sit quietly in our rooms, but also enjoy diversion? Wouldn't that be a bit miserable to suggest that we can't enjoy diversion? Without diversion, there is no joy. With diversion, there is no sadness. Wouldn't it be then a better option to embrace diversion for what it is and allow ourselves to enjoy fully the diversion? That is what constitutes the happiness of persons of rank, for they have a number of people to divert them and the ability to keep themselves in this state. Skipping ahead again. Diversion. It is easier to bear death when one is not thinking about it than the idea of death when there is no danger. I'll read that again. It is easier to bear death when one is not thinking about it than the idea of death when there is no danger. From childhood on, men are made responsible for the care and of their honour, their property, their friends, and even of the property and honour of their friends. They are burdened with duties, language training and exercises, and given to understand that they can never be happy unless their health, their honour, their fortune, and those of their friends are in good shape, and that it needs only one thing to go wrong with them to make them unhappy. So they are given responsibilities and duties which harass them from the first moment of each day. You will say that it is an odd way to make them happy. What better means could one devise to make them unhappy? What could one do? You would only have to take away all their cares, and then they would see themselves and think about what they are, where they come from, and where they are going. That is why men cannot be too much occupied and distracted, and that is why, when they have been given so many things to do, if they have some time off, they are advised to spend it on diversion and sport, and always to keep themselves from being fully occupied. How hollow and foul is the heart of man. Pascal suggests, but doesn't arrive at the point of promoting meditation, probably because it wasn't a really developed practice in the West of the 1640s, 50s, if I don't mistake the date. But Pascal also probably wouldn't have suggested it anyway, even if he knew about it. His belief was that the supreme being, God, that's where the good rested, and that's the only source of salvation, and that it wasn't for us to experience joy. Bliss, peace, detachment probably wasn't on the menu for Pascal in the first place. He doesn't spend much time talking actually about boredom itself, what boredom consists of, what it means to be bored. I think that's much more of a late 19th century, early 20th century thing with Heidegger, talks a lot about boredom. Not that I understand a word of what he says. Pascal makes no roadmap for a quiet life. There is no practical steps to dealing with a bored life, whether that's because Pensées are unfinished or whether he's truly cynical, he's truly pessimistic about ever finding that peace. That is not clear to me. I suggest Pascal is fundamentally deeply pessimistic about the possibility of ever finding true peace and detachment. There is no roadmap for a quiet life in Blaise Pascal, never mind a happy life. What's been hardest for so many people during the several lockdowns is the sounds of our own heads. I feel it's the people who have been the most accustomed to society, to being sociable. They've found their own company unbearable, and we've all, to a certain extent, experienced a reflexive disgust, which is maybe quite a natural consequence of where we are at the moment, but shouldn't be natural at all in any society if we could embrace lack of stimuli, quietness, slower pace of life. Blaise Pascal is pessimistic about humans' ability to be and to stay happy. That's why there's a point where that famous passage where man doesn't know how to stay quietly in his room, the origin of all human misery. That passage doesn't say he doesn't want to stay quiet. He doesn't want to demeurer en repos, or stay in quietness. He doesn't know. Man doesn't know how to be quiet, how to stay quietly in one's room. De ne savoir pas. Pas de ne vouloir. He doesn't say to not want to be, it's he doesn't know how to be. That, to me, suggests that humans exist, according to Blaise Pascal, in the very thick, or the very thickness of ignorance. Not that you don't want to be, that you don't know how to be. You don't even know the situation in which you find yourself. Ignorance, like stupidity, is not a simple lack of knowledge. It can also be a deep desire not to know. Not wanting implies a kind of self-reflection. I know what I don't want, but the man, the individual that Pascal suggests, is that he doesn't even have any detachment to understand that he could want or not want peacefulness. I hope I haven't mangled my words up too much, and I hope you find some peace wherever you are.